On. Good morning,
Hello,
BowerBirders.
BowerBirders. We
Good morning,
definitely
Ben.
rehearsed that. Good morning. How you going?
Absolutely. Hey, what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk. We're going to try something new today. We're going to try talking. Do you want? Are we going to do the split?
Yeah, I think we might do the split. So we've got
Okay.
a meeting coming up in about an hour. So we've got to record this quickly, jump onto the meeting, and then come back to see what we learned from the meeting.
Yeah. So essentially, we're talking about awards today. So a little bit of the history of how BowerBird has worked with awards. A little bit of history of awards programs themselves to start with, and then we'll take this meeting with an awards program and then come back and see if we learn anything.
The other thing we want to do is start sharing some of the stuff we're working on and thinking about. So once we go through the history of awards, you'll realize why we haven't really done many awards in the last couple of years and why tech allows us to get back involved with awards and why journalists want to do that. So the history of awards is that, well, we did our first awards program in 2017.
No, actually, I think it was before that. I was thinking about
Before that,
the chronology of this. I'm pretty sure we started with Architeam.
Architeam. Oh, maybe we did.
Yeah, which I think we didn't really give them their dues. I think
No.
we started the conversation with the Australian Institute of Architects in Victoria reasonably early because you had a relationship with Alison Cleary, but I'm pretty sure maybe it was even 2015, like it was pretty early, maybe it was 2016 with Architeam.
Yeah, and to give you an idea of what was happening was we have all these people who are entering awards. They have all of this content. The journalists want to talk about all of these projects because they tend to be really good projects too, because they're award-winning projects. And so the partnership is really tapping into these awards programs and helping them share those projects because that was the missing component. Everybody was getting an award or a badge, but nobody was really talking about it.
I think it's important to understand the importance of awards programs, particularly for us in Victoria here in Australia. Basically, people didn't really used to think that much about the media, right? So they weren't getting stuff photographed to be published. There were no websites back in the day. And so we had a really strong culture of architectural photography, and it was built almost exclusively on the awards, that you had to get your project photographed to be able to enter awards, to be able to win an award, right? So a lot of that is ego, I would say. There's a fair whack of ego winning an award, obviously, but also there was a sense of contributing to the community and being acknowledged in public for award-winning
Raising the
architecture.
profile of the industry as well to
Absolutely,
highlight
absolutely.
the best work that's coming out.
Full credit to the Institute of Architects here in Australia who created or contributed to creating a real culture of high quality architectural photography as well as design excellence in the buildings that were being created. Do you know when their first awards was run?
They have been going for a long time. I don't know when they would have first started, but I imagine award programs with institutes and organizations around the world have been running for some time.
So Google tells me 1981. I don't know if that's just the National Architecture Awards. Maybe there were chapter ones before that, but 1981.
Maybe. Okay, so 40, 45 years, that seems less than what I was expecting, but maybe there were smaller ones or different ones along the way.
Yeah, as I say, that's the national ones, so maybe there were.
But I think part of the history that's interesting to me, because we're coming from the perspective of publications, is when publications started to get involved with awards. So it used to be these organizations and it was all about the award, but suddenly you have so many awards programs popping up. You've got Houses Awards, you've got Design Awards, Architizer Awards. Does ArcDaily? I think ArcDaily has some sort of awards.
Well,
Frame magazine.
World Architecture Festival grew out of publications as well. I don't know if they've always been the same one, but EMAP, I think, is who they are. And they publish, AJ. Architects Journal, that's what it is. And so, yeah, that's come out of publishing as well. So that's the World Architecture Festival has come out of a UK publishing house.
So, and they're tied together because they're doing two things. On one side, the publications are trying to source new content. On the other side, this is a revenue stream for publications. So award programs have spread everywhere. When we did our first awards program, and what we saw was, yes, there were magazines attached to these awards, but awards were still not being shared widely. It wasn't being talked about much. If it was being talked about, it would be like a local newspaper, and that was it. One story.
It was purely the award. Like, it was, if you won an award, then you maybe were included in some media around the awards program, but otherwise you probably didn't get featured.
And it was always about the awards program. I remember that being an early conversation because our pitch has always been, great, let's talk about the awards program. That benefits the award organisers. But really, you have sometimes hundreds of entries which are worth being published. You have all this opportunity to get all of that content out to the world and really lift up that content base. So there's a lot of benefit outside of the awards itself.
What we realized really early on was that the building blocks of an awards program and a press release were pretty much exactly the same. You're telling the story of a project, you're including the images. So we're in this position where we're like, hang on, everything that you guys have got for the awards program is what our journalists are trying to get to. And what happens in that is you get a press release on the awards program with a handful of images included, and then the journalists are like, but we want to publish stories about the projects. Can we just have all of the information so that we can do that? And I think that was when it sort of clicked for us of just going, this is so close to being exactly what we do on BowerBird. How can we work in with awards programs to actually get each of those entrants published again and again and again?
So then we ran awards programs in many places all over the world. I remember us jumping to different organizations, and that worked in the early days, but it really became apparent that there was a lot of labor involved in doing that.
We should probably name check some of them because they were fundamental to us. I think the first international one, I don't know where it came in there, but we actually partnered with Passive House in North America,
That's right.
North American Passive House Association.
That.
And I remember Chris, who lived in Canada, he sort of led that for us. And I'm not sure if it was that, I think it was through the awards program, but then it was just like, it's just an association sort of arrangement. And then we did AIA Austin I remember that really well.
Yeah, there was a few. And I remember, wasn't there one in the UK as well? There was.
Yes, quite right. New London Architecture. I don't know. There were a lot of ones that we started working on in the initial stages. Then our strategy started to change.
Yeah, so what
Ingrid Spencer from AIA Austin.
So the challenge always was, you're dealing with an awards program, you might have hundreds of entries, and then you've got to get all of those onto BowerBird. And that was a manual process. So you'd have often very clunky systems being used for awards programs. You might have a spreadsheet, you might have all these folders with content. And then we're trying to communicate to all of these people how this is going to work with the awards and to make sure that they're, happy for their work to be going out to the media. But there's just a lot of work that goes into getting all of that stuff ready for the media. And it got to a point where it was easier for us to fly around the world and just go visit architects to get their content up than it was to deal with some awards programs.
In those early days, in 2016, 2017, you were our only developer, and you were not a developer. You taught yourself how to program and stuff. And so we were like, okay, we need to get an import tool together so that we can get a spreadsheet in the right format, get it into BowerBird so that we can essentially have a one-click import of an entry. And Nick, when he's coding, which doesn't happen very often, which I think is good for his health, when he's coding, he goes into the zone. You call it like creator mode or creator time.
Ben's had to sit next to me as I get very grumpy if anyone's asking me questions, as I have large headphones on trying to get rid of the world.
I would reframe that and say, Nick got very grumpy at me if I ever tapped him on the shoulder during creator time. But, those were the early days and ran big programs like Architeam. Like when we say big, like we're talking about, hundreds of entries for Architeam and AIA Victoria. And we were doing all of that ourselves. We were hitting the phones, calling people, onboarding them, explaining BowerBird, all of this stuff ourselves. When you look at how much work that is for two people who are trying to build this crazy new world of media, I think ultimately we got to a point where it was like, we don't have the technical chops to do this as well as we would like to. And it's a lot easier for us to do the stuff that we knew how to do well, which was jumping on planes and going to cities all around the world, which is hard work, really hard work, and meeting with architects.
So fast forward a few years, and now we've got an established dev team. They perform at a really high level. They can just move through features very quickly and efficiently. And we're looking at the awards, and this has all come about in the last few weeks, really, because we're quite a nimble company now, and all the awards are starting to pop up again. We're like, actually, maybe we should be thinking about the extra features that should go into Bower kits. Because from a very simple standpoint, we've always thought that we should be able to add badges to a Bower kit so that journalists can see what awards a project has won. And this sort of started to unpack some ideas.
A good analogy is if you've been to Airbnb on the desktop website recently, you'll see they have lots of badges now around, like, as seen in, a particular publication. I think they also have awards. Do they have awards on there as well?
Maybe you do have awards for different, yeah.
But what we do is we have the ability to verify those things. So we can actually work with an awards program to have all of that verified. Essentially, hey, not only is this a great project to publish, but you can also mention it won a commendation or it was a winner in this awards program.
The simple idea is you can just add a badge, but like Ben said here, it's not verified. So anybody could, in theory, just say that they won an award. I don't think people would really do that, but there is this beauty of working with awards programs so that they can tag a kit and go, they've just won an award. And then it's up to, if you own a Bower kit, to be able to say, yeah, I want to display that. So we're sort of working through this idea, but there's a lot of work in that as well, because then you need a way, like for those awards programs, to say who actually won. And they've got to be able to do it quickly, because you typically have to release that on the day that the awards are announced, so that all the journalists who then get the press release around the awards can go, oh, this is who actually won. There's a bit of work involved for us to be able to manage that in a more efficient way.
I'm being triggered with the memories of those early awards programs because I completely forgot. There was one Architeam Awards where I was at my parents' house in the country, and this is in the days before national broadband network in Australia, so internet was pretty slow, ADSL 2 or whatever it was, and I was having to download images from a server somewhere onto my computer and then upload them to BowerBird, and it took me, I think, a week. I spent a week just doing that part of the process. It was hell. And I think that's why we're at this point now where we're like, hang on, we've got a dev team that we can push that hell onto.
So luckily, quite a few awards programs now have dedicated platforms to manage their awards. So things like Awards Force, and there must be others. What that means for us is now that we have a dev team, we can actually integrate with a lot of those systems as long as they're set up to do that. So that when people enter awards, the ideal scenario is it's one click. Somebody enters the awards, then they choose whether or not they want to also plug into BowerBird as a media platform. So all the heavy lifting is done, which now we can get on with actually sharing that to journalists and getting published.
We're in this phase of kind of researching again. So we know how it used to work, and now we've got all these extra tools and this extra capacity to create new tools. And so I think we're at this point now where we are wanting to talk to a lot more of those awards programs and say, hey, how can we work together and what can we do? So we're in this nice position where we can kind of come up with new ideas. And I think that's part of what this conversation with the awards program later after this is going to be about. Like, what can we actually do and how does it benefit everyone? And I think a lot of awards programs, by their nature, they want to promote the awards program, because the idea is, hey, you promote the awards program, you get more entries, you make more money, or you achieve whatever goal it is for that organization. But we've always come at it from the other view that you should be value adding. You should be giving people who enter into your awards the opportunity to go out there and get published and benefit from the awards program all year round, essentially. And obviously we make money when someone subscribes to BowerBird. It's not altruistic, but it is a different perspective quite often to the awards program itself.
The awards organizers want to talk about the awards. The awards entrants want to see their project get published and acknowledged. And if all you've got is a one-page story about here's the awards and here's the top 3 winners, you don't even get to go through the full list. You end up with just here's your one line item. Whereas if you attach the award to that project in the opposite direction, so now you've got 200 projects which are all talking about that award. That is far more powerful. And I've always said this, it's about empowering all of those members or people to be part of the media process rather than expecting the awards program to do all the heavy lifting.
Yes.
Because
They can't.
They can't, because the story's not that interesting. You've got an awards program, you've got one day, you've told everybody about it in the world. Whereas there is thousands of stories within all of those projects, and that just keeps rolling out to the media. So that's far more powerful.
Interesting thing is that a lot of these awards programs, they have PR professionals that help them, communications people internally that do a lot of that. And I think it's this idea of, you put out a press release and that press release is looking at theme for this year's awards. Like, there's a powerful story about regional public architecture this year. And it's great. It's fantastic getting those stories out there. But you kind of need to choose only one message. So you go regional public architecture, that may be the standout theme from the year. But then if you didn't do regional public architecture, do you even get featured at all, or you're just a name on a list? So I think when you can multiply the number of stories that, hey, this is an award winner and it's dealing with, sustainable residential architecture or any number of different things, you multiply the number of stories rather than having to choose.
Remember us looking at how the media was working around awards. You have to win an award larger than the publication that you're submitting to. So let's say you've got a project and it's in Noosa, small town in Queensland. If you win a World Architecture Award, that's big news for Noosa. It's not big news for the New York Times. So there's a downflow where small towns, they want to be talking about the big things that are happening to the people within their city. So that's where awards can actually trigger those local stories. But there's so many more stories that come out of awards too. They do just keep flowing because now those projects have been verified in some way as being high quality. So they automatically get validation from a third party.
The other piece of this puzzle that people might not really be aware of externally is when you do have a publication who started an awards program, that awards program serves another purpose for them, and that's that they often end up getting the first bite of the cherry for new projects. So if you have a publication, like let's say a print publication, that awards program is coming through to you. You, as an editor, you might even be on the jury. You're able to see those projects as soon as they come through. They haven't been published anywhere. And so you can pick up the phone and say, hey, John, I want to publish this. I want this to be the cover story in our April issue. Can I have it first? That's always that quiet thing in the background that it's actually a really fantastic flow of brand new exclusive projects for particular publications. That's because architects will get their projects photographed with the awards as the deadline. So it's literally the first time anyone has seen a lot of these projects. And I think that's something we're sort of trying to figure out at the moment because we're looking at partnering. First of all, we're agnostic to all the different partners. Like, we're not going to do an exclusive deal with anyone. We want to work with every awards program. In the same way, that's how we work with publications as well. We're not sort of locking anything down. But if we can help those publications to continue to get that value where they're able to find those projects first, I don't see a real problem with that.
I think we can get it to flow in through the awards programs and then to a submission board for publication, at which point then they can ask for an exclusive. So BowerBird's at this phase where we're trying to tie all these loose ends, which exclusives has been this outlier for a long time. But now we've got the tech where we can lock that down relatively easily. So the idea that you have an awards program, then it automatically comes into BowerBird. It automatically goes to the journalists who can use that content, and then they can choose the projects that they really want in, let's say, a print magazine. You end up with a very seamless flow there. The issue previously was if you come through the awards program, suddenly you press submit on BowerBird and you're blasting out to the world. And understanding that the catapult or the rocket is not what you always want. Sometimes you want to go and be selective with a magazine first, and that's where the exclusives come in. So we're building that into Autopilot soon. We'll have recipes there where you can say...
What is Autopilot, Nick?
Everyone asks that. It's the new AI submissions on BowerBird.
The reason Nick says everyone asks that, we have a channel on our communications platform, Slack. When someone turns off Autopilot, we ask them why. And almost every answer is, I don't know what this thing is. I don't know
What this
I don't know
is.
how it works. We know that we need to explain it, but it takes us a little bit of time.
So in 1 minute, before you used to have to manually say, I want to submit to this publication. Now AI can look at your project, create a big list of publications, and then rank them based on who they think is the most publishable or who's most active. And then Recipes takes that to the next level where you can choose basically a media strategy to say, I want to go look for an exclusive first, or I want to then go out to local publications. So it's streamlining that whole process rather than you manually pressing a button again and again and again.
Which I still think was part of the value of BowerBird in the early days, because you're really trying to build those relationships with publications. And we always knew we didn't want to do a scattergun approach. We didn't just want to blast something out to thousands of journalists. And it's taken AI to come along to allow us to do that actual matching and then to drip feed that out rather than doing a big blast. So yeah, what used to be manually, you had to sort of remember to log into BowerBird each week. Now it just does it on its own.
That's a big part of autopilot. It's not a big email. It doesn't send out to 30,000 people. What it does is it chooses a publication today, submits to them, and gives them 24 hours to secure the story, and then goes out to the next person and the next person. And it will just run for almost a year like that. And it just gets rid of the spammy nature of newswires and I guess, what did you say? It's the blast and scattergun approach, which is you're just telling everybody at once, whereas there's just smarter ways of doing it.
Well, and I think the really interesting thing, I know we're talking about awards, but the really interesting thing is that we've always thought that your project has a life over a much longer period of time than people think. And part of the thing that works against that is if you upload a project, it gets featured on Design Boom, Arc Daily, Design Milk, all in a week. Other editors are consuming those publications and they're going, I've seen that. It's old news to me now. Now you have this thing where it's like, okay, week 1, you get a feature. Week 3, you're getting a feature. 6 months down the line, you're getting another feature. So people aren't seeing this oversaturation of a particular project. It's new to their audience. It's exciting to their audience. They can publish.
Pulling that back to the awards, you can see a project that may have started to go out to the media, then something changes. They win an award. So the story has changed. It's the additional information that goes into that project over time. Because we can see, AI being able to ask questions as it's going out to each publication. They're probably going to have unique questions for their audience. So a story is growing over time. And so rather than it just being, I've done it today and that's it, this thing goes out to the world, this thing is getting bigger. More people are talking about it. It's becoming more significant, which again ties back to those small local publications. Because I remember a story years ago from Robinson Architects where he'd just been published lots, went out through BowerBird, and the local story was project gets international fame. And you go, you can see how you get the story from the stories. It's very meta.
Yeah. This is an upcoming feature of Autopilot when you have a publication that could be a match, but you haven't given enough information around, so Noosa could be a good example. Hey, we could submit to the local Noosa newspaper, but we can't because you don't talk enough about Noosa. So add more information, tell more of the story. And then as you do just generally add more information, you're going to find that it matches with more publications.
Okay, Benjamin, we're coming up to 30 minutes. So that's almost our half time.
Yep.
But we've got to run off and go do this meeting, and then we'll see if it's worth a second half episode on this topic.
Well, I mean, generally what happens, so this is just a little bit of, insider knowledge. Nick and I will come off any meeting. It doesn't matter what the meeting is. So any meeting with someone outside, and our brains will just be sparking with ideas and exciting things that we can do. So maybe we just record, real time, us just sparking off each other and see how many promises we make that we can't commit to.
Okay, cool. See you folks. Bye.
See you. Welcome back.
And we're back. Okay, we've gone and we're just speaking to an organization there around awards partnerships. So we've done many of those before, but it's the first time in a couple of years that we're looking at how we streamline that whole process. I think that's exciting to be able to get away from the manual labor that it used to take to get all the awards entries up.
Yeah.
So
I think that was my realization from that conversation. I mean, it's so straightforward. I think that's the thing. When you figure out that, oh, it's in the members' interest, it's in the interest of the awards program, and especially this idea of spreading a city or a country's architecture out to the world in one hit and everyone working together. I mean, it's genuine and it works.
The beauty of tech is you can scale this work. So previously, as you add in more awards programs, you end up having to have more staff to manage this. But because now we've got this dev team who can build these systems, once we have the system there, adding an extra awards program, it really isn't that much work. It's new awards program, import your entries, choose who the winners are, or connect it all up, and maybe that's already done through your awards platform. So that's a lot easier.
What's interesting is how, when we're talking to publications, when we're talking to editorial teams, there's quite lots of question marks around how they can work together in a more organized way. So how they can have their team in there working on a submissions dashboard, and we need to figure out how all of that works. I feel like whenever we talk to an awards program or awards organizers, they already understand what it is that they're there to do. We got to get the awards program out there. We've got to get value for our entrants. This makes perfect sense. There's only a couple of steps involved. I think all they're interested in is that it doesn't take them extra time, and that's what we're able to do with tech.
It's a reminder too of how big some of these awards programs are. You sometimes have entire teams of people working for an entire year, and it's one of those jobs where you have these peaks and troughs, where you'll have periods where all the entries are coming through, and then you'll have some sort of assessment of those entries, or maybe you have to do site visits, and there's just these peak times, intense periods, and then it'll go flat, then next intense period, and then as soon as it's all over, getting ready for the next year. So it's an intense process because you've got deadlines. Anything with deadlines.
It's always funny, the World Architecture Festival, which is obviously massive, like the number of entries they have, I don't know, it's in the thousands, I think. We have this conversation with them that goes all year, and then the awards finish, and I feel like they turn around a few weeks later and start the next year in, like, they open entries in January or something, and it always feels like, oh, whoa, it's off and running without us even knowing.
It's like Easter coming straight after Christmas. As soon as it's all over, we're ready for the next one.
Yeah, the old hot cross buns on the supermarket shelves on Boxing Day.
We're also just talking there about how we integrate with existing PR companies, because often awards programs have already hired somebody to do PR, and we're actually doing two separate jobs. So the PR is often calling people behind the scenes or trying to get a specific story out to media around the awards, like, we focused on this subject matter this year or this topic. Whereas what we're really trying to do is help the entrants get published. It's a slightly different strategy. And so really you just stay out of each other's way and allow them both to run at the same time.
I think that it comes back to what we've always said about PR companies. Like, we work really well with PR companies because PR companies should be focused on crafting a narrative for an organization or a practice. It's when you're getting to that point where you're like, okay, we need to tell a particular story because this is what our members need to be seeing in the media. So again, public regional architecture, whatever it is, like, that's your message. That's what you're trying to get out there. And that's what PR is really good at. I'm not saying that one day BowerBird might not be able to be good at those things as well. But I think, like, having that conversation just then where there is an external PR company working for that organization on the awards, they've got a very clear contract of that they're going to send out 3 press releases. And there's no way that they could be expected to also do the PR for each of those practices and each project that's featured in the awards. It would just be a full-time job for a whole year. So I think that's where we have...
Well, we've done this before. We've seen the stats. Is the publicity around the awards, you may have, let's say, 5 stories, whereas the publicity around the projects can be in the hundreds. Because even conservatively, if you have 200 entries, and not all of those are unique entries, so let's say you've got 150, each one of those is probably going to get published more than once. Like, I would say you'd get published 5-10 times if that project is running. So the exposure around that awards program and those projects that have been entered gets really high. You're harnessing everybody's efforts rather than expecting one PR agency to do the heavy lifting.
I remember when we first did our first awards partnership with the Victorian Architecture Awards, we actually went through and found all of the published articles. I'm sure we've got it in a spreadsheet somewhere, but it was substantial. This was at around a very specific time. So I think we measured it by a few months after the awards to see how many of those projects were published because they took part in the awards program. And none of these awards programs are really measuring that. They're measuring how many times did the awards get mentioned, but they're not measuring the impact of the awards for people getting their projects out to the media, which is probably because it doesn't really happen without something like BowerBird. Unless you're sort of proactively doing this sort of sharing of individual projects, then you're leaving it all up to the architects.
We were going through our old docs there, and you found the old website. We'd built a micro site just to manage the awards process for awards programs, which is going through the typical press releases, things like non-disclosures, because a big thing with awards is you can't tell the world who the winners are until the announcements come out. So there's all these aspects to awards that we have to be conscious of when we're building apps or how we're integrating. So it's just refreshing going back and seeing, oh, there's already a structure there that's ready to run.
Yeah, and it hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
The landscape hasn't changed a lot. So yeah, we're excited to get started on all of this again. And just to anyone who may be listening or watching, it'd be great to hear from different awards programs. Like, hit us up. We want to talk to you.
Yeah, once the infrastructure's there, which will be up in the next couple of weeks, this can be rolled out to any awards programs, and that'll allow that awards programs to be displayed on Bower kits so that when you're giving an award to somebody, the publicity is going out with the project itself. So, and all of that information can be fed into things like AI Writer. So as AI is writing about these projects, it knows that this project has won this award, and it can actually include that in stories. So we would expect the idea of awards to be filtering through all of this content in a much more organic way.
Something else that I know, things like the Institute here in Australia, they also do jury citations. So they actually have comments from the jurors saying, this is how we assess this project. I don't know whether they're putting all of that into their award system, but the ability to have a jury citation on there as well is probably pretty powerful. You're getting references from your peers.
Yeah, I think that is powerful because you've included this story. It's like we've been talking about this for ages, but all the people involved with the project, well, the jury is involved with that project now because they're assessing it and they're bringing their expertise to being able to critique that project.
You could interview them.
You could interview them and get this amazing side of that story.
Yeah.
I think the awards, you can see how it all ties into what we're working on now. We need to get busy and build lots of cool stuff around it.
Fun. Don't tell our devs.
Cool. Like we said, if you are running an awards program, come talk to us, especially at this phase, because as we are building these features, your input is invaluable because it allows us to customize things and deal with the way that you run things. Not all awards are run in the same way. So it's good to know your edge cases beforehand so that we can make our system flexible enough to plug into other awards programs.
Cool. Hit us up.
Okay. All right. Thanks, folks. We'll chat to you later.
See ya.
Bye.